If you have ever ended your homeschool year feeling burnt out and frustrated and disappointed at how your plans did not go how you had wanted and hoped, then you're probably making this mistake. Hello and welcome here. I'm Christine, a homeschooling mom of three, a second-generation homeschooler, and today we're going to be chatting about the topic of homeschool planning, one of the biggest homeschool mistakes that I see homeschoolers making, the mistake that I have made myself more than once, but also some homeschool planning tips that I have found to be very, very helpful throughout the years of homeschooling that we have been doing. I don't know how many years. How many years has it been now? We started when my son was 4 and he is now 10. So like 5.5, 6 years, something like that. And I have learned a lot along the way. I've gone through many different seasons. I started with like a 4-year-old, a 2.5 or 3-year-old, and a baby. And then like life has gone on and they're all older now. They're 10 and 8 and 6. So things have had to change and flex. And I do really love a homeschool schedule. I am not ever going to be somebody who does not plan things out because everything falls apart when I don't do that. I have to be very intentional with my planning for things to go well. Discipline is something that I believe strongly in. And when I say discipline, I don't mean like correction. I mean just staying focused and intentional in your homeschooling because that is how I personally get things done. If I don't have that, I cannot lean on motivation because motivation wanes over time. So yeah, that's something that I have to be for myself. But let's chat about the biggest mistake that I see homeschoolers making. And it sounds a little bit like this. You've got a fresh new homeschool year on the horizon and it's all shiny and new looking and you have such high hopes and you're so excited and you have this beautiful idea of how the year is going to go. Maybe you've set some goals, you have some fresh new curriculum that you've purchased and you're going to do this schedule and it gets like halfway through the year, maybe not even halfway, and the wheels just start falling off. And you end the year feeling so frustrated because you just did not get where you wanted to be. Your beautiful curriculum that you got didn't work, or you didn't get to the parts that you wanted to get to, and you're just frustrated. And here's the mistake you made. When you planned out your beautiful, new, shiny homeschool year, you failed to look back on the year before, and the year before that, and the year before that, and evaluate what worked and what didn't work. And I think that is something that we all fall into the trap of doing. We have these ideals and expectations, but we fail to be realistic about whether or not they're actually going to work. So let's chat a little bit about that and how we can avoid it in the future. This video is kindly sponsored by TinyTap. Some days homeschooling just does not quite go to plan. In fact, most days that is the case, whether it's juggling the needs of multiple children or trying to keep a child from getting distracted while you have to step out and deal with something else. That is where TinyTap comes in. It's an educational app made for ages 2 through 8 with over 250,000 games and activities, all created by teachers and trusted publishers. You can use the same app for children of different ages. You're going to find everything from math and reading to social skills and daily routines. It covers a lot, which makes it really easy to weave into what you're already doing, so your child can really stay on topic with the things you're already teaching in your homeschool. And honestly, I really love that they can do it independently. The layout is simple and intuitive, and there are little prompts that encourage them as they go along. My daughter loves getting her little reward at the end of completing the levels. All of that means that they stay engaged and you're not having to sit there right beside them the whole time. Whether you're reinforcing what they're already learning or using it as a meaningful way of making sure that they're staying engaged while you're dealing with another child, TinyTap is a really helpful tool to have on hand. And you can use it offline if you download the games in advance. Plus, it has no ads. I personally really love that. I like knowing that nothing's gonna come up in the app that I am not already aware of. And it's also great for road trips when you're probably not going to have access to Wi-Fi. If you want to check it out, use my link down in the description below to get 20% off and start your free trial. TinyTap is a really helpful tool to have in your homeschool mom tool belt. So first of all, please look back on your previous homeschool year and look at the year before. And if you've been homeschooling for longer than that, look at the year before that. And look at what worked in that year and what didn't work in that year. Because that is going to give you so much insight on how to practically plan for your upcoming homeschool year. One thing that we made a big change on was how our homeschool terms were laid out. In New Zealand, they typically do 10 weeks of school and then take a 2-week break and do it. They've got 4 terms like that. So 4 10-week terms, or give or take, and then 2-week breaks and then a longer summer break. And not that far into our homeschool journey, I changed to 6-week terms with 1-week breaks in between, because I found that I would get burnt out long before the end of the 10-week term. And 2 weeks of break often meant that we got too far off our routine, and it just didn't really work well for our family. And so I made that change, and that made a big impact in our homeschool. The other thing that I actually changed this year in particular was that I made a very strict 4-day week homeschool schedule. And the reason I did that is because I found that the balance of keeping on top of my home and the chores that needed to be done in my home, I just was not getting to them, because in other years we kind of did like half day on a Friday, or like would do the catch up on a Friday, or maybe we would do like a full day on Friday. And I just could never balance the two well enough. And it still is always something that I'm having to like work on. But my goodness, it has been like a night and day difference as far as like the cleanliness of our home when I get a Friday to actually sit down and, well, not sit down, I actually like work a lot on Friday. I am cleaning bathrooms, changing sheets and beds and all that kind of stuff, and vacuuming has made a huge difference. Also, just have to give it a little plug, but my robot vacuum cleaner has been a game changer. I've had it almost 6 months, and I would go out and buy it again in a heartbeat. That thing, I love it so much. It has saved me so much time. So anyway, just saying that if you're struggling with vacuuming and keeping on top of floors that are constantly dirty from very busy little feet running in and out the house all the time, a robot vacuum may just change your life like it has mine. So that is something that I made a change on based on previous years and how they were going. Like, I was just constantly burnt out, and I could never keep on top of the house. I couldn't do the basic weekly chores well because I was so exhausted by the time that day came that I just didn't have it in me to do that. And also, as my kids have gotten older, they've actually required more of me as far as mentally. I think that a lot of moms will relate to this, where when you have really little kids, like little babies and toddlers, it is physically exhausting. When your kids get a bit older, it's also exhausting, but in a different way. It is mentally exhausting. The teaching is more mentally exhausting because it's like more challenging stuff that you have to teach them. You're balancing the needs of 3 kids and 3 different levels and all that kind of stuff, plus all of the questions, and then dealing with character issues and having to pause and deal with distractions. Like, that is exhausting. And so I found that having a dedicated day to just catch up on housework was so freeing. And it also meant that our weekends, then I didn't just feel like constantly behind. I could actually enjoy just family time instead of feeling like I had to devote the whole weekend to cleaning and catching up. And come Monday, my house was actually put together enough that I felt like calm and peaceful about sitting down and doing school instead of just constantly feeling in a state of disarray. So that is something that I learned from looking back at previous years, and I would have just continued in a terrible cycle if I hadn't stopped to look back. So here's the next thing I want to tell you, is that you have to be realistic. You have to be. Okay, you can set this beautiful schedule, you can set these expectations, but you have to be realistic about whether or not you're actually capable of doing it. And when you're doing this, I want you to be super careful that you are not looking at any other homeschool moms and comparing what you're doing with what they're doing, because we all have different strengths and weaknesses. Okay, there are some moms who are so good at being involved in co-ops and doing extracurriculars and doing all the things, and they thrive off of that. I'm not that mom. I will never be that mom. That stuff exhausts me. It drains me. I'm not saying that it doesn't have value. We do like an extracurricular here. We do meet up with a homeschool group. But I'm not heavily involved in a bunch of things. My kids are not heavily involved in a bunch of things. In our home, we prioritize home time and family time. And that's what works for us. And there have absolutely been times in the past when I have looked at other homeschool moms and been like, well, she's doing it. I should be able to do it. What is wrong with me? Like, I'm just lazy, obviously, or like week, you know? And I think we probably, if we're honest, we all have those thoughts at times where we're comparing ourselves to other people. So I just want to tell you not to do that. You are fearfully and wonderfully made the way that you are. You have your own strengths and weaknesses, and you just need to lean into those and not be comparing to anybody else. Just do what works for your family, but be realistic. Don't look at anyone else and be like, okay, I'm going to plan my schedule to be like that. No, don't do that, okay? It's okay to try different things, but just be realistic when you're doing it. And also know how your year typically goes. So for us, when it's getting near the end of November, beginning of December, life is busy. You know, that's Christmas time coming up. There's lots of get-togethers and barbecues, and it's a busy time of year, you know? So I'm not going to plan a whole bunch of extra school beginning, like toward the end of the year. That's not happening. Like, we're easing out of it. And that's good. I kind of know when we need to cut off school for the year, because we need to just like be a family and chill out, and mom is tired and I need to focus on what to buy for Christmas lunch and not, you know, what I have to teach my kids in math. So be realistic with how your year typically goes and your seasons go. If you're about to have a baby, don't plan your school to be like hyper intense, please, okay? But also recognize that sometimes having routine actually helps. I am somebody who does so much better if I have some kind of routine. It doesn't have to be intense. It doesn't have to be on the dot times. But knowing what to expect next really, really helps me. And I know that it does for other moms as well. So even if you're in a season of, you know, maybe you're adding a newborn to the family, perhaps you're going through a season of sickness, and there's medical complications with different things. You know, I've walked those seasons as well. And having like a predictable rhythm and routine during the day still helped, not just myself, but also my kids. And it just kept the home sort of flowing smoothly instead of throwing it all to the wind and being like, well, nothing's going to work because life's not, you know, as it should be, and yada, yada, yada. Be realistic about the season you're in and understand your strengths. Don't worry about what anybody else is. Do what works for you. Along that same line, something that works really, really well for us is to front load our year. So I tend to make the beginning of our homeschool year more like heavy and intentional, because I know that by the time we get to the second half of the year, we're all kind of waning and kind of getting over it. So I tend to front load the year, and then I might change things up a little bit in the second year, because that also kind of gives us a new lease on life, if you will. And we tend to do better with our homeschool schedule in the latter half of the year when I do that kind of thing. Next, I want to tell you to schedule in breaks. Even if you are homeschooling year round, you need to schedule in some breaks. You can decide how long that break is or whatever at the time. But if you don't schedule it in, it can be really hard to figure out when to stop. Some people are good at this, and that is fine, but I am not naturally good at that. I need to schedule in my breaks, and sometimes we take an extra week off if I don't feel well rested enough after 1 week, or sometimes we're doing a house project or something and I want that done before we sit down and start doing lessons amidst, you know, plaster dust and paint rollers and all of that. So I do play it by ear like that. But I do like to schedule in breaks as long as there's flexibility. You have to build flexibility into your homeschool year. You cannot have it set in stone, rigid. You will fail 100% of the time because life happens. And I do think there is something to be said for that. You know, we walk into our homeschool year sometimes saying like, oh, this is a season that we're in and it's going to change. But the reality is something else usually comes along, and then you're in a different season that still isn't like normal and predictable. And so you need to learn how to go with the flow, but also have some rhythm and routine in between. So when you find that balance, it's really beautiful and helpful. And I think that this is where my final point really comes into play, and something that I've learned has been so valuable, and that is to homeschool with intention. When you know your big picture and your goals and what you want for your children, the daily planning of homeschool and the year-long scheduling of homeschool becomes a lot more clear and a lot easier to implement, because you know what you're working toward. So you're not going to get like totally thrown off when there's a sick day, or, you know, you need to drop everything and go and deal with this thing that's happening over here. Because in the big scheme of things, you know that, okay, well, it's okay, we've got this time to catch up on stuff or whatever. And so I think that when you are homeschooling intentionally, it just clarifies everything. You know, what are your principles in your home? What's your family culture? For us, it's, working hard, but also enjoying the work together. That work is not a bad thing. That these things that we're working on are going to equip us with the skills that we're going to be able to use to do the things that we love. And so when I homeschool like that, when I put our homeschool first instead of trying to fit homeschooling in along with life, I realize that homeschooling is actually our priority in our day. When I do that, I enjoy homeschooling my kids a whole lot more because I'm not feeling nearly so like, okay, well, I have to get through math lessons so we can get to this extracurricular really quickly. I'm like, no, we're not going to do the extracurricular if it's going to mean that we have to rush our school in the morning. Like, this is the time I want to spend with my kids, pouring into them and the relationships that I have with them. Everything else, as far as like the non-necessary items, I'm not talking about like doctor's appointments and things like that are like necessary in life, but the extras that we tend to add on for whatever reason, they tend to be, they're second to what I'm doing first with my kids, and that is our daily homeschool routine that we do together. And that's going to be different for every family. Your intentions may lie completely elsewhere as far as how you want to structure your days, but I encourage you to homeschool with intention. Don't just like wing it because it tends to be a lot harder to reach your goals when you don't have like a clear direction that you're going. That is something I've really found to be very different and something I've implemented a lot more this year. I felt so much less guilt about stuff because I'm just like, this is where I'm called to be right now. This is what I'm doing with my kids. We're going to enjoy each other, and everything else, all the extras, we can do that when they're older. We'll get there. But right now we're just working together. So I hope that these tips were helpful. I know it's a little higgledy-piggledy. I have a lot of thoughts on the subject, but my main point is hopefully to give you encouragement and some practical ways to work on your homeschool schedule. I can't give you a nitty-gritty, in-depth plan for how to lay out your homeschool year because that is going to differ so differently for each family. But these are just things that I've learned throughout the years and things that have really helped me. So any questions for me, leave them down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.